Hey, this is John. Thanks for joining me for this video today. If you've ever read my blog at johnbius.com, you know that quite often I engage in storytelling mode. And one that as I thought about this subject today, one that came to mind was when I was home. It was a Thanksgiving weekend, and I had my first job, and I had to work either the Friday or the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and my parents had gone out of town. My whole family had gone out of town. So I had Thanksgiving weekend to myself, which for a 17-year-old with a car and a little bit of money, that can be slightly dangerous. But I managed to keep myself in check mostly. And what I did was I needed to, one of the days, I think it may have been the Friday after Thanksgiving. My memory as I get older, it just goes. But I needed something to eat. And my mom and dad weren't home. And I'd had Thanksgiving at my grandmother's, but I didn't think to bring any leftovers home. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and eat all the pizza I can. Now, I didn't have much of a budget. So it wasn't like I could go to the local pizza place and just buy a whole bunch of pizzas. Or pizzas, whichever. So I went to the grocery store and looked for the frozen pizzas. Now, frozen pizzas back in the 80s weren't like they are now. Frozen pizzas now, you sometimes have trouble distinguishing from them and what you get at a pizza place. They're pretty doggone good quite often. Back in the 80s, not so much. The cardboard and the crust didn't taste much different. The toppings were kind of cheap. But I didn't care. I was a teen who liked a lot of pizza. So I found these pizzas about this big, and they were $1 a piece. Just rough looking little pizzas. There was the orange, they had this orangish sauce, I can't say it, orangish sauce, and some cheese on it. And then the ones that had sprinkles of red blobs was labeled pepperoni, and sprinkles of brown blobs was labeled as sausage, and then no blobs was the cheese pizza. $1 a piece. So I got 20 of them. Now, I got home and I started heating them up in the oven, assembly line fashion, all excited about eating my pizza. And as they came out, I would sit down and stack them up and get them all ready. And, I had one set aside to kind of munch on while I was cooking all of them, so that, it was my warm-up pizza. And then I sat down and started eating these things. And at first it was a lot of fun. And I'm eating them and eating them and eating them and eating them. And I'm like, oh, this is great fun. But so I got further into it. My stomach started telling me, this ain't quite as much fun as you think it is right now. Now, if you're wondering why I'm telling this whole story, it's with a purpose. Because sometimes in my path over my modeling history, since I returned to the hobby in 2006, there have been a few points that I somewhere along the way realized I wasn't having all the fun that I should be having. Now, there can be a lot of reasons that people model, and there may be more than one reason. Sometimes it's a creative output, an artistic thing for somebody. Sometimes it's a way to just kill time, because maybe there's other things that are going on that you're trying to, it's not that you're trying to avoid them, but you just need a break from them. Sometimes it's because of a liking of another thing. I got into modeling airplanes as a kid because I liked World War II aircraft. That was kind of my attraction. The further along I went, I'd started off building all sorts of models, but eventually I focused on World War II aircraft because of my interest in history. So there can be a lot of reasons that we model, but I think most people, if you ask them, why do you model? When you really boil it down, they're going to say, because it's fun. And that's the mantra, I suppose you could say, that I am constantly trying to get across. This hobby is supposed to be fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong, right? Every now and then you'll find a kit that maybe isn't being as fun as you thought it would be. Maybe it's a poorly cast kit, or one that has a lot of fiddly detail when you're not really interested in doing fiddly detail. Sometimes it's not so much the kit, it's the things outside of the kit, maybe that are going on in your life, or it could be as simple as just problems, other hobby problems, an airbrush not working, or other equipment failures. I mean, there can be a whole lot of things that start making what you're doing less than fun. But I know in my own experience, there have been times that I would not recognize early on what the problem was. I just knew something wasn't right. It's kind of like, I got a grandson. He's still on a bottle, the baby bottle kind, not the alcohol, never mind. But he's still on a bottle, and at his age, when he's unhappy, he can't tell you exactly why he's unhappy. It's either he's hungry, he's tired, or he needs a diaper change. I mean, that's pretty much it. But just as he can't tell us what the problem is, sometimes in our modeling, we may have trouble recognizing what the problem is, or even that there is a problem. So I've started using a few simple questions to help me evaluate if I'm feeling down in my building, to help me evaluate, is there a problem, and focus in on what it is and how to resolve it. Okay, the first thing you really have to do, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, is recognize that it's not fun anymore. You may not know precisely why, but at some point to sit back and you go, this isn't fun anymore. The model, the hobby, whatever, it's just not fun. So realizing and accepting the fact that something about it isn't fun. They say the first step in solving a problem is recognizing the problem, and I guess that's true. If you have a flat tire, the first step to solving it is realizing, that I'm driving along going flump, 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 flump. I've got a flat tire. So recognizing the problem is your first step in solving the problem. But then when it comes to solving it, when it comes to recognizing it and pinpointing it and figuring out, okay, why am I having a problem? I've learned a few questions that help me do that. One of the first clues that I have for me personally, when I'm realizing a project is not going the way that I would like it to go, is when I start avoiding the workbench. When I start deliberately finding other things to do. If you're having fun, you want to get back there. You want to work on that model. But if you're not having fun, well, you don't want to go to the place where the fun isn't. So quite often, that's the first clue that I have that I'm getting bogged down in a project, is that I'm just simply not having fun when I go to the workbench. And that workbench avoidance has become a really big alarm bell, okay, what's going on? Let me evaluate that. Let's get it back on track. Another thing I've found that I do that tends to indicate there's a problem is, instead of building anything, I just kind of sit there and fiddle with the parts. And by that I mean, I may be spending a lot more time than I usually do on cleaning them up, or on test fitting them, or just not actually accomplishing anything. I'll have the parts and I sit there and I put it together and I look at it and I take it apart and I set it down, and then I do something else and I put these parts together, and I can sit there for an hour, maybe even 2 hours, and realize that all I accomplished was sitting there for 2 hours and moving parts around. When I start doing that, that's another way that I realize, okay, there's some kind of problem and I need to deal with it. Now, as I get older, I find it much more difficult to keep my focus on certain things. I mean, I sit and I work at this end of this room with my model desk, but on that end of the room, I got a recliner. And it's quite often, if I get a little out of focus on what I'm doing, or if it's not holding my attention, and if I have time, the draw of going over there and maybe taking a nap or watching some YouTube is really strong. So when I have just almost no focus, I can sit down and I don't feel like I'm not enjoying it, but I start to do something and I go, what was it I was trying to do? And oh yeah, I forgot to do this. Or I find myself, painting one part and then thinking about another part, getting ahead in the build and setting that one down and starting on something else, and then getting several steps along and realizing I forgot to do another step. Now sometimes that can be excitement. Sometimes you're so excited about getting to one part of the build that you lose focus. But sometimes that lack of focus can be more from not enjoying the process than from actually enjoying the process. Finally, a surefire way for me to know that, okay, I'm not really having fun with this, and this one's kind of obvious, but I find that this is when things are kind of getting critical, at a critical level in a kit. And if I haven't recognized it by this point, this is usually the tripwire that I go, whoa, something's going on. And that's when I start talking about the kit. Whether it may not necessarily be, to the whole world on social media or on video or something, but it may just be to some friends of mine that I communicate with frequently about the hobby. And I start complaining, not just, there's the complaining that I'm doing this one part and it's a little fiddly, but I know that after this one part, everything's going to go well and I'm still having fun in the overall process. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you start to take all of those previously mentioned issues that I talked about and you start drawing them out and letting others know about them. I don't want to work on this kit. I'm tired of being at the workbench. This thing is dragging me down. It sounds a little obvious, but there have been times that I've been complaining about a kit and it would take a friend going, it sounds like you're not really having fun. And I would go, wow, yeah, you're right. I'm not having fun. So to me, that's kind of the final tripwire that, okay, things are building up. The fun has gone away because I'm complaining about it to others. Okay, of course, once you identify a problem, you have to come up with some solutions for how to handle that problem. And there are a few that I've found that for me, and maybe for you, will be helpful in terms of getting past that lack of fun, getting over that hump, so to speak. First, I'll just sit down and examine the kit and go, what about it am I not having fun with? I mean, there's some kits that as you go through them, you start realizing I'm not having fun on any of it or very little of it. Other times there may be things that, okay, it's just this one segment. If it's more of that one segment kind of stuff, I start mentally treating it. And if I wouldn't have pointed to my head, you wouldn't have thought mentally. Anyway, I sort of start, mentally thinking about that one aspect of the kit as its own kit. It's separate from everything else. I'll even go to the extent of taking just the parts for that section and putting it in a little box, putting the rest of the kit away, and my entire focus will be on just those parts, not what else is going on. An example of this, now this is from a few years back when I was building aircraft, but some friends gave me one of the best kits that has ever been produced. To me is 1/32 scale Spitfire Mark 9. If you've kept up with my stuff for any amount of time, you know I love Spitfires. I really do. But that's a massive kit. And I was used to building, kits with 50, 60, 70 parts. If I remember right, this one had like 275, 300 parts. The cockpit alone was 75 parts. And so I was working on it and I loved all the detail and I wanted to get it done and I was kind of sort of having fun with it, but kind of sort of not. And I realized it's because there's a stack of sprues this high, well, maybe it's this high, but you know what I mean. There's this stack of sprues sitting there and I said, you know what? The cockpit is the kit. Right now, that's the kit. And so I put everything else aside, put it in a box, got out a little plastic tray, put the cockpit parts in there, And all of a sudden it was as magic. Just everything started falling into place. I started having fun again. When I got to the engine, which was another 70 parts or so, I did the same thing. Set the cockpit aside, got all the engine parts together, focused on the engine. Then when I got to the rest, I could say, okay, I've built these other two kits, the cockpit and the engine. Now I can focus on the last kit, the whole airframe. And that helped me move beyond that. Now, in some cases, the way I address this is I go, okay, I want to build this kit, and there's going to be parts of it that aren't easy, that aren't necessarily fun. Like right now, if you've been keeping up with the series, I'm building a Mobius 1/32 scale Viper Mark I from Battlestar Galactica. I really like the Viper. I really like building that kit. But if you've ever built that kit, you know there are some parts that just aren't fun. You know, sanding all those seams. I mean, it just, you know, it's just something you have to go through. So part of what I do to help me break the cycle of being down on a kit is I find another fun kit, one that's not difficult, one that's much easier, one that won't present any challenges to work on at the same time. Now, because of the way I work, I'm always working 4 or 5 kits, so that helps. But even before I was working 4 or 5 kits for this video kind of stuff, or for the blog, I found that just having, I called them relief valve kits, you know, that I could work on, and when the one started frustrating me, I could set it aside and I could pick this other one up, and I could happily just go along and just do stuff to it. And there were no challenges, there were no problems. It just gave me a feeling of success. It gave me a feeling of, okay, I'm getting somewhere. And then after I got somewhere on that kit, I would go back to the one that was difficult. And I went at it with new eyes, I guess you would say, with a fresh perspective. There have been a few times that I was building a kit that really just was getting inside my head so bad that I had to just set everything aside for a few weeks. And now some of you may hear that and you may go, dude, how emotionally invested do you get in your models? Well, I got a YouTube channel and a blog, and I say that I love this hobby. I'm all in. You know, I'm mentally all in, which, I mean, you know, a whole lot mental there, but what I have, I'm all in with it. When I'm doing this, I'm very passionate about what I do. And so it can become an emotional thing. And I don't mean a crying, you know, oh, I can't do this kind of thing, but just sometimes it just makes you mad. Sometimes it just, you know, you're going, I think I would rather go to the dentist. And not that I have anything against my dentist. But you know what I mean? You would rather go get a tooth pulled sometimes than work on some of these kits. And so sometimes taking a break from the whole hobby for a brief period, maybe it's, you just say, okay, I'm going to take 3 days where I'm going to do something else. I'm going to step away from this. Maybe it's a week. I remember one kit that I built, and if you've watched my videos or read my blog, you know that I harp on them, and I think with reason. But I built a kit from a company called Special Hobby. It was an airplane called an IL-10. It was a Russian aircraft. If you know what the IL-2 is, it was a further development of the IL-2. Looks kind of like it. It wasn't a good kit. I mean, the left fuselage half was actually like a 1/4 inch longer than the right fuselage half. It wasn't that it was a short shot. They lined up on the aft part of the kit, but as you progressively went forward of the cockpit, it's like 1/2 just shrunk because everything got further and further off. And there were so many problems with that kit that it bugged me. I was so irritated with it that I actually just set it down, put it aside, and walked away for 3 months. I didn't build a kit. I didn't work on a kit. I didn't paint a kit. I didn't buy kits. I didn't do anything with it. It's been a few years now. I don't remember what I did during that time. Probably pester my wife and annoy her and, you know, everybody else in the house. But I just walked away from it. Now, maybe 3 months was a little excessive. Maybe it wasn't. But sometimes just stepping away and saying, okay, right now I'm not in a place here where it's conducive to doing things here. So taking that time can help get a refocus on what you're doing. Another more drastic option, and I have done this a few times, and people have questioned, they said, dude, you're crazy, which I've never made the case that I'm not. But there have been a few times when I would sit back and evaluate it and realize that I'm not having fun with this kit, that I would go, it's the kit. It's the kit that I don't like, and I'm not having any fun with it. And I don't know that completing it, you know, sometimes people say, oh, but you'll feel better when you complete it. That's like saying, you know, once you hit yourself in the head with enough with a hammer, when you're done, you'll feel good about being finished. Now, I'm sure if you're hitting yourself in the head with a hammer, that when you're done, you'll be glad you're done. But in the real world, in a hobby, that doesn't make any sense. And there have been a few kits that I would just either put the lid on the box and put it up on the shelf in the stash and would just say to myself, okay, someday I'll get back to that. And there's still a few that have sat in there. There have even been a few, and this is kind of what I call the nuclear option. There have been a few that I have gotten so disgusted with for whatever reason that I would close the box up, I would walk out to my garage, I would dump it in the trash can and put the lid on it. And I would tell myself, when I do that, I'm not taking it back out. I'm walking away from it. Now, if you're thinking that's a waste of money, yeah, it's a waste of money. But I think there's a balance with, is it worth the fun? Now, don't hear that and think, okay, this guy's just throwing away kits all the time. There maybe been 2 that I've done that with in building 350 plus models. So both of those cases were, I just realized it's the kit. It's not me, it's not circumstances, it's the kit. And there ain't gonna be any fun in finishing it, and nobody wants a 2/3 built model. So let's just do everybody a favor and dump it in the trash. Now, another aspect to think about when you're looking for solutions to why you're not having fun, look beyond modeling too. We've all had this happen where there are things that go on outside of modeling that the relief valve that modeling is, the things that modeling does for us to kind of help us, you know, push things out of our mind, to help us focus on having some fun, to be maybe the bright spot in a day when maybe some other things aren't going so well. Sometimes the hobby's ability to be a positive point is overwhelmed by factors outside of modeling. And those can be difficult to pinpoint, because it's often easier to blame the modeling for why we're not having fun than to look at it and go, you know, there's other things going on in life that have made this not fun. That happened to me a few years back, and it actually kind of drove me out of modeling airplanes and into sci-fi. So it kind of had, from where I sit now, a happy ending. But at the time, there were some things going on in our family life that were very difficult. I mean, they were just, I won't bore you with them, but they were hard, really hard. And I was not enjoying the modeling I was doing at the time. Now, for a while, I thought, man, why am I not having fun building these models? I used to have all of this fun. I used to build airplane after airplane after airplane after airplane and just loved them all. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm not enjoying building airplanes anymore. How could I not be enjoying building airplanes? But then I started looking at what was going on in my life. And to be honest, it took this, when I began to change genres and I started having fun with the modeling again a little bit, that I could only then look back over the path and go, oh, there was a lot more deeper stuff going on. But you have to look at what else is going on in your life. Now, that may mean that sometimes you have to step away from the hobby to take care of those things. And certainly we don't want to get so involved in our hobby that we let our family life, our work life, the other aspects of our life get out of balance. And it's real easy to do that because this can just pull our attention away. This can be avoidance too. But recognizing what things are going on outside of the hobby and then saying, let me deal with those. Let me put the hobby aside for long enough. And whether that means stopping it for a week or whether that means, okay, I'm only going to do it 50% as much, but focusing on those things outside of the hobby that are a problem. And then you can come back into it with a whole new perspective, and the things that are slinging mud on it have gone away. Of course, in doing that deeper evaluation, and I've talked to friends about this a lot, because there have been several who this has happened to. And it's at some points in my hobby career, I guess you'd say, it's kind of happened to me. Sometimes things outside of the hobby start going wrong because of the hobby. And we have to really be aware of that. You know, in my own life, I've had a few times where I've had to step back and go, am I doing this hobby at the expense of those that I love, or at the expense of my job, or at the expense of our finances? And sometimes the problem looks like it's outside, but the root of the problem is inside, meaning the hobby. And if that's the case, it's actually easy to address. You know, if you're saying, hey, I'm working, 20 hours a week on the hobby and it's creating problems with my family, well, let me just back it down to 15. I mean, you'd think it wouldn't be hard to give an extra 5 hours to your family, but sometimes we get so engrossed in this, I know I do, that you don't want to step away from it, which causes problems outside. And when there's problems outside, those problems come back inside. So it's kind of like a double agent problem. The problem isn't the problem, but the problem is the problem, if that makes any sense. I think I've just confused myself. But look for, if it's problems outside, are those problems a result of the hobby? Now, if they're a result of, okay, look, something bad happened outside that had nothing to do with the hobby, and that's where my focus is, and I'm not enjoying the hobby right now because of that, you deal with that. But sometimes those problems on the outside, like I've said, can be as a result of the hobby. So making adjustments is going to make it more fun again. Another thing that you may run into that will actually turn out to be a good solution, it may sound kind of weird, but sometimes the solution to get over the hump of whatever is not being fun is to step away from social media for a little bit. Maybe not entirely, but while there's a lot of good information and loads of great people in social media that have to do with modeling, let's face it, there's some jerks out there. There's some attitudes that just aren't conducive to enjoying the hobby. And sometimes, despite the fact that you may be, with a group of people digitally where there's 100 of them and 99 of them are really positive and encouraging, and you're having a good time and you're sharing tips and you're learning stuff, that one guy sometimes can make you go, why am I even bothering? And there've been a few times, there's a few groups that I simply find it easier to step away from, that I can actually enjoy the hobby more by being less engaged in social media. what I try to do is find that, I've used this term before in this video, that sweet spot. Where's a place where, it's like Cheers, where everybody knows your name, where you fit in, where you're with like-minded people. If you're getting into a place where there's a lot of negativity, that may be what's bringing you down, and simply stepping out of that group. You can just click that little button that says leave group, or whatever the case may be, depending on where you're at. Block somebody. Don't go to it for a week. And I'm telling you, this works. There was a website that I used to go to that at the time, it was something I went to daily. And I thought, I've got to go to this, I've got to go to this. But after a while, I started noticing that it was that website that was dragging me down because there was so much negativity on it. And the few things that were helpful were just completely outweighed by the things that were just pure nonsense. And so I thought, you know what, I'm not going to look at it for 30 days. And I really had to force myself to do that because this had been something I looked at every day, multiple times a day. So I forced myself to not look at it for 30 days. And you know what happened after 30 days? I was having more fun with the hobby, and I even forgot to go back. I didn't remember, oh yeah, I haven't been going to that website. I didn't remember it for like 3 months. And I actually went and looked back at it, and I could look at it now and go, and it wasn't necessarily a number like this, but I could look at it and go, 70% of this is absolutely negative. It was doing nothing for me. I thought, why would I do that? Why would you go to a store where you walked out having been beat up 70% of the time, right? I just said, I'm not going back to it, period. I'm going to find other places that are more enjoyable. And that really helped. When you boil it down, that's what it's all about. It's having fun. I don't care how jaded you have become as a modeler. I know some guys that haven't built kits in years because they don't like this and they don't like that. There was one fellow that I knew that every kit that came out, he would just bash it, red lines all over it. Nothing was buildable. But in every case, both in my own life and in those lives of people I know, I can always ask them, look, at some point, did you have fun with this hobby? Every time, people would say, yeah, there was a point that I was having fun at the hobby. And I always say, then you need to get back to that because that's the important part. Now, getting back to fun in the hobby can mean a lot of different things. It may mean fewer hours on the hobby. It may mean putting aside other hobbies so that you can spend more time on this one. It may mean for me, it was a change of genre. Going from just being purely an aircraft guy to pretty much purely a sci-fi guy, that's really brought just this whole breath of fresh air into the whole thing. Sometimes, I've known guys who they were just all about the airbrush and they got sick of using the airbrush and they said, I'm going to start brush painting. And brush painting really helped them move beyond that hump. Sometimes it's the other way around. Guys get tired of brush painting and they say, I want to airbrush. Or they want to try different products, or they want to try a different style. It can be a whole lot of things, but getting back and finding an area, finding that sweet spot where you're eager to sit down, it's balanced out in your life, and you're ultimately having fun with what you're doing is where we all want to be. So when you're there and you're not having fun, you look at all of these things and you come up with solutions, and the end game in mind is, how do I have fun with this? Well, getting back to the pizza story, my gut started telling me, it was just like a little hint at first. You're eating pizza, you're eating whatever, and your stomach kind of goes, roar. And you're like, hey, what was that? Oh, must mean need more pizza. That's what you think when you're 17. After a good number of those pizzas, and I'm talking way more than I should have been eating, my gut started telling me, no, we got to stop. we got to stop now. Something's wrong. We have to reevaluate this. And of course, as you know, all things do when it comes to food, when you overeat, you're miserable for a while. Luckily, and I won't go into detail, but luckily our body has a way of taking care of that. But in that process, I realized, you know, eating pizza's fun. Eating a lot of pizza's fun. Eating a whole lot of pizza ain't fun. I need to get back to where it was fun. So I went through the steps that it took for that unfun part to move beyond me. And I was back at the fun. And that's the way it is with the hobby. You're not having fun? Figure out why, take steps to change it, get back to the fun. Because as I say over and over, and I will say again in videos, and I mean it, I really mean it, in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. I don't care what award you're trying to win. I don't care who you're trying to impress. I don't care about any of those things. It's about fun. And if you're watching this video and you're going, no, it ain't about fun, you may need to sit back and examine things. Because even as someone who derives part of their income from this hobby, I recognize that I'm more successful from that standpoint if I'm having fun than if I'm not having fun. So it's about the fun. Well, I hope this video has been helpful. If, you know, maybe right now you're at a good spot in the hobby, you know, and you're thinking, well, I don't have to worry about these things. I'm at a good spot. Hopefully they give you some things to keep in mind so you can recognize when you start hitting the bumps, you know, that you can take action before anything becomes a problem or before you start losing the fun. But if you're having a difficult time with it right now, then maybe go back over some of these things that I've talked about, evaluating what the problem is and evaluating the way out of the problem. What's the old saying? You know, if you're digging a hole and you're stuck, first thing to do is stop digging, you know? So stop digging for a while and figure out, how do I get back up out of this thing? And these steps should help you give you a framework for how to do that. Well, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you're still at this point of the video. I always appreciate when somebody leaves me a comment that lets me know they got to the end of the video. I'm truly grateful for that. So thank you for hanging in there and sticking to the video for the whole thing. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate, you know, I appreciate the likes, the subscribes, the shares, all of those things really do help me grow the channel. That's one of the things I'm trying to do. And when you do that, it really does help. One of the simplest ways you can do that is if you click down there somewhere, there's a subscribe button. If you would hit that subscribe button and then click that little bell icon so you'll know when I got a new video out, that really helps me. It really does help me grow the channel in so many ways. So if that's what you choose to do to support me, thank you. I am most grateful for it. Also down below, there are some links down here to the various social media platforms that I'm on. And if you're on one of those and want to connect with me, I would be grateful for that. I always like hearing from people. I'm one of those people that, you know, I may not know you, and if we meet somewhere and you say, hey, I've seen your website, or I recognize who you are, and I say, hey, I saw you on this or that, or I've seen your website. We may have never met, but I'm the kind of person that I'll sit and talk with you for half an hour like we've always known each other, because I just like getting to know people. So leave a comment. Go to the website, johnbius.com, hit that contact us button, contact button. Send something to me. I like hearing from people, and I do appreciate it. There's also some links down there to Patreon. Patreon makes all this that I do back here possible. While I would continue to model if it weren't for Patreon, I would not be able to do it at the pace that I do it with the materials and supplies that I do it. We as a family, we couldn't afford for me to do it. So Patreon makes that possible. And I'm really grateful for those folks who step up. Patreon supporters, thank you. But if you're not currently a Patreon supporter and you have the ability to do so and you like the work that I do, please do take a look at the levels of support that I offer. They have a little something for everybody, and I hope it will help you further enjoy the hobby, to further have fun with it. So I'd appreciate your consideration there. And again, as I just said, thank you so much to the Patreon supporters who are currently helping me out in this. I can't tell you how much it means to me and my family. Words can't express it enough. The fact that people would say, yeah, I like what you do enough to send you some money. And I know while there are tiers and levels and you get things back because I want to give back for what you give to me, what I'm giving back just isn't in comparison to what you give me. And I understand that. And I am thankful for the commitment you make to helping me continue to grow in this hobby and get these things done and get these things out here and try to get the word out to keep having fun. And finally, and I say this at the end of every video, and I mean it, in this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.